Years ago, my hippie group of friends said, "Have you read about the Anastasia books?" And I'm like, "What is the Anastasia books?" And the advice was that you should take seeds and spit on them. The idea is that when we're creating food in our own garden, it's going to assimilate our DNA in the family if you can put your own saliva in them. So I took the seed, called out my daughter, called out my husband. I'm like, all right, everybody spit into the bowl. We did it and like 10 different things. I don't know what happened, but we had the most flourished garden that year that I did this idea. I'm like, talk about eating local. And we're telling these seeds with intention and frequency and vibration to eat according to what is in what we just meshed in it.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Ask Julie Ryan Show. It's where we blend spirituality and practicality to help you live a life of purpose and joy. We have Sevanté Wulkan on the show with us today. Sevanté is the founder of the Center for Intuitive Food Therapy. She has a degree in food science, dietetics, and nutrition, and teaches about using food to conquer disease. Since intuition and food are some of our most favorite subjects, it's going to be interesting to hear how Savanti combines the two. Please remember to subscribe, leave a comment, and share this episode with your family and friends. Now let's go talk with Savante. Savante, I'm so thrilled you're here. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so glad to be here, Julie. Yes.
I got lots of questions for you. And I was so excited to have you on because, food, none of us can escape food. We can
No.
escape other things like booze and drugs and other things that can be addictive and affect our health and our spirit. But food's kind of hard to avoid. So I
Yeah.
think
You don't want to avoid it. You want to embrace it.
exactly. Exactly. You say there's a consciousness to food and that we can learn to eat consciously. What do you mean by that?
Well, first we'd have to identify the word conscious. And my interpretation around consciousness is having the awareness that something is better for you versus something unconscious. I almost use the analogy of, I don't almost use, I do use the analogy that someone's either awake, asleep, or they're sort of drowsy. So when you're saying that some people know something's bad for them, but eat it anyways, they're in the drowsy mode. And those who are awake are very conscious and intentional about what they're putting in their body, knowing that they get one suit of flesh and we want to take care of it for the long haul. And then the ones who are asleep, they don't care. It doesn't matter. They'll grab and go at the convenience store and they eat, microwave, and move on in life. So there's the wide range. So I seek to allow people to have those choices, but really look at being more conscious, being more aware, being more awake to realizing that food wants to get our attention. Mother Nature has provided so many clues. And I'm just here to be a little bit of that guide to allow people who want the greater understanding to have it.
And I want to unpack that as we go through this conversation with specific foods and how they relate to specific people, because one size doesn't fit all, has been my experience. But it's way more than just the actual food itself, but it's the energy of the food. And
Yeah.
that's what fascinates me about the work that you're doing. Real basic question for you. Does praying over food have an effect on its nutritive value?
Well, that's no one's ever asked me that, and that's an excellent question. These are take it or leave it. This is just me being a opinionated person in terms of these topics. I believe they do. I think prayer has the ability to create, transform, and frequency and vibration occurs when you pray. You are raising vibration, and I think that has the ability to transform the food to be more in alignment with yourself. Does that make sense?
It does. And I know there's been a lot of I don't know, a lot. There's been research done on praying over water and praying over other liquids that when frozen, they look different. They crystallize in sometimes more of an orderly fashion, if you will, versus a chaotic fashion. Have experiments, to your knowledge, been done with that on food as well?
Well, my teachings are exactly in the realm of what you just said. So I'll unpack that. And what you're referring to, Dr. Masaru Emoto's work. And he did exactly what you said. He looked at food. Oh, sorry, he looked at water. I looked at food. He looked at water. And what he discovered is if he can put the word love on water and he can put the word love on a ball, on hate on another bottle, you can actually look under the microscope and you're right, the crystalline structure changes. The word love on that bottle, that water looked like perfect snowflake, like exact, beautiful, everything was just immaculate. You go to the water that had the word hate and everything's distorted and everything's completely in disarray, ugly, if you will, and you're consuming that. And so, in my mind, and he's just one of a few key researchers that I really embrace as a food scientist myself, I realized that he did these studies on water, and food is mostly made of water.
Oh, good point.
So, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, then I'm going to assign a word to food. And so that is really there's 30 years in between when I studied food science and I grew up as a spiritual intuitive and became an advanced food healer. But 30 plus years later, was 5 years ago, that's when I started assigning food a word and created what is now known in 35 countries and growing, the Food Healing Oracle Deck. And my teachings could have been in any platform, but they just lent themselves to be delivered in that fashion because people who know about oracle cards literally are a card with a picture, whether it's a mermaid, a dolphin, or animal spirit, or in my case, food with a word. And then I unpacked from my intuitive abilities what that word was being offered, the message from Mother Nature. And then I also unpack the nutrition around it. And if you can actually ask these cards, what does my body need right now? I'm feeling very down and depressed, but would it be a good food that would raise my vibration? And so on and so forth. So that's the long-winded way, but explaining a little bit more behind my teachings, because you mentioned exactly the ability to change and transform foods and water for our body.
Which I think is indicative too of the energy, not only in words, but in images as well. Because
yeah.
you put the word love, which is not only a word, but it's also an image, and the energy that's being picked up in those crystals is a combination of both, I would think.
Absolutely. Now, love in my world, the food healing world, the food healing orthodox world, is strawberries. So when someone thinks about Valentine's Day or they think about, what food represents love, a lot of times people will say strawberries. And they might say chocolate, one of the two, or they love something else. But generally, strawberries equate that emotion. So when you pull a strawberry card from my deck, you will absolutely see the word love. And it's not only that, it's also this color red, romance. And it also teaches people, if they know about what is known as this, the chakra system. Not everybody, I don't know how mainstream our audience is here, but we have an energy system in the body and there's 7 energy centers. And the root chakra is represented by the color red. So we're creating a foundation of love within our body just by eating strawberries. We're just actually invoking that attention.
Well, and Valentine's Day, that's when you see the most chocolate-dipped strawberries.
Yes, the
Right.
best.
So
That's
so
the
you're
best.
you're combining the 2 of them. Taking the prayer thing a step further, I'm born and raised Catholic, 12 years
Mhm.
Catholic schools. Grace to me is bless us, O Lord, and these thy gifts, the prayer that if you're at a Catholic gathering, most people are going to say that. It's a rote prayer that's been said for centuries. My husband was raised Southern Baptist, and he's a big Southern guy with a Southern accent, and he prays like Elvis. The first time he prayed at my home, we were dating, and it was Thanksgiving, and I thought, oh my God, Elvis is praying in my dining room. He says things like, Dear graceful Heavenly Father, blah, 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 blah. And he goes on and on and on and on. Question being, is prayer going to have the same effect if I'm doing my rote Catholic prayer versus if he's doing his Southern Baptist Elvis type prayer? Have you ever looked into it that deeply?
I don't have to. I just know that when someone is holding the vibration of grace and love and intention to awaken and be more connected to the divine, it doesn't matter what they're saying or how they're saying it. It reminds me when you asked me that way back when, years ago, a reporter from the news press, it's like a USA Today network paper, and he was interviewing me on tarot cards. And I was a tarot reader at that time. I'm more oracle now. And he asked me if Christians can get oracle reading. And I said, yes, sir. Anybody can. Really, these cards are not something of the devil. They're more about being sort of a mirror reflecting something intuitively you already know about yourself. I'm just really presencing something that my guess is that you already know. So, yes, Christians and um, anybody of any sect can do that. And so that's the answer. Is like if you're praying, you do you. And these cards are reflective of that. They're pulling out the intuition that you're providing for them to just kind of read back to you what's going on in your world.
Yeah. Well, and it's all about blessed is food to our bodies is the basic message, I think.
Yeah.
And regardless of how it goes. I had a crazy uncle who, when we were kids, we loved it when he was visiting because his grace was always Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Whoever eats the fastest gets the most.
Oh, I love that.
So it was still a prayer, but it was just a fun one. And, we kids thought that was great.
I mean,
Uh,
great. I mean, prayer is like, thank you for this nourishment. Let's dig and receive. Like, you can say anything as long as you're saying something. I always believe that an invocation just kind of sets the tone and allows you to kind of settle into a space. That's the best way of saying that. And there's another doctor, I don't know if you're familiar with him, very, very famous, Dr. Bruce Lipton. And he speaks on epigenetics. And a renowned biologist, and he discovered that there's a consciousness in our cells. So there's opportunity to talk to ourselves, talk to our body. You know, some people don't speak kindly to the body, and the body's listening, and others speak positively to the body, and the body's listening. And if we can be harmonizing love and peace and joy to those cells, we can be harmonizing those cells to harmonize with the other cells to create a a higher health for sure, but definitely a higher vibrational state of being. I
mhm.
talk a lot about that a lot in my recent book, High Vibrational Wellness, how we can do that. And I believe prayer and meditation are cornerstones to that.
Mhm. I agree too.
Yeah.
You mentioned tarot cards and oracle cards. What's the difference?
Yeah, a lot of people are confused about that. Tarot cards, there are two different systems. Tarot cards have been around for thousands and thousands of years, and they were created with a system that reflects, interestingly, um, nature's five elements. This is a big uh, passion of mine to talk about food in nature's five elements. But it's a certain way to read cards and understand life. There's actually the way tarot cards are set up. They have a hero's journey process, and they give you an understanding of where you are in your life. And that's just one system. And there's many versions of tarot cards, but there's a main tarot system, if you will, called the Rider Waite. And then other people have created many, many, many tarot decks versions of that. Now, Oracle's a little bit more. wild, wild west. It's the cowboys that allow you to have a little bit more freedom to digress from that exact system. So literally you can choose any topic in the world and in tune or channel or write a story around that. So like I said earlier, some people could be looking at oracle cards that are gods and titans, and others can be animal spirits and mermaids and dolphins. And there's an array of topics that you can do oracle cards, which have their own system, a standard picture, and you can look at the picture and assume something from it with a word and a message. And I just had a very unique background to be able to combine not just the spiritual world of oracle cards and food, you become this food oracle, people call me, but I also came from science. I came from food science and dietetics and nutrition, and I understand that piece too. So when you're looking at a blueberry or the card blueberry, I'm not just saying blueberry means clarity and you take my word for it. I provide a little bit of backup more on all the sides. Blueberries are excellent for eyes. They do provide the clarity. The more you eat blueberries, the better you have eye health. And then I talk a little bit about some of the esoteric principles too. And so I kind of make this real, like I said, a combination of woo and world to give people a greater opportunity to see how important food is. And it shouldn't be avoided. I mean, food is so celebrated. It's in every single birthday, anniversary, wedding, and funeral. I mean, it's culture. It's everything, everywhere, and that's why I think it's been so embraced, particularly around chefs, because people want to know the why. Why did I choose when I went into the grocery store tonight to have artichokes? There's actually a reason, and I have provided my own version of the guidelines of why you're choosing to make that meal tonight. And it's surprising. I should say it's not surprising. I see it thousands of times, but people have been craving that or going through something when they realize the word associated with those foods. Or, wow, I just bought that last night. And so I think our soul or our spirit within or the divine inspiration, whatever you want to call it, is well ahead of the mindset we have as humans already on how to keep our body healthy. We just have to listen better. And that's what I'm here to provide.
How do we discern between a craving that's going to be healthy to us, for us, and something else? So you can have a craving for artichokes or you can have a craving for Thin Mint Girl Scout cookies. How do we know the difference
Ooh, that's a tough
when
choice there, Joey.
yeah. Yeah. Well, the thing about the Thin Mints, though, and I don't eat sugar anymore, but back when I did, there's not that many cookies in a box. So I would rationalize, okay, I can eat these 15 Thin Mint cookies because they're little and there's not very many of them versus 15 big chocolate chip cookies. That mind game that a sugar
Yeah,
addict plays. How do
yeah.
we how do we differentiate between the two and get out of that addiction mode and into the cognitive of, okay, a box of Thin Mint cookies is not going to be great for us, whereas the artichoke will. But how do we do the teeter trotter on that? How do we balance that?
Well, I think there's a lot that goes into answering that. One, I couldn't even answer all of them in the time frame we have because there's a lot of things that go with. Is there something going on hormonally? Is there something going on emotionally? I mean, there's so many emotional, mental, physical reasons why we choose these cravings. What I can offer is that we can determine, and I think people already know this. This is why I teach intuitive food therapy, that they're choosing that craving because it's associated, I believe, most of the time with something emotional and mental going on. Yes, we're craving it. Women hormonally, there's different cycles that like I gotta have my sugar. But you realize you don't have to have your sugar, especially since once you wean yourself off of sugar, it's a non-issue. But I teach people a lot about how to be very present with themselves. And when they do have that particular craving, is this in my highest good? Ask you to ask yourself, is this in alignment? Is this related to how I'm feeling about that conversation I just had with my spouse that didn't go so well? is this related, or is this for my best, or is this something I wanted to celebrate and be okay with it? You're much better to eat the box of Thin Mints and love it and enjoy it and thank it for providing you all the good feels. Better to do that than to sit and eat it with disdain and regret and guilt. That's the whole talking to the body. Your body will transform and break it down and process it so much better in a higher vibrational state. And you're more likely to not return to it instead of eating it and going, I shouldn't be eating this. This is terrible. Oh my God, I'm going to gain so much weight. Oh my God, there goes another cavity. Like, you're telling your body to attract that lower vibration. That's not going to do anything. Just eat it and move on and then go back to the artichoke the next time. Like I'm almost better. It's almost better to do that. But really, I think it's more about maybe keeping a food journal and starting to see where these cravings are coming from. Because I'm almost certain it's something going on in your day. You don't just suddenly say, I have to have that. There's something leading you to that or as a reason. A lot of people, like I'm in Florida and I watch during hurricane prep. When we all know a hurricane's coming, I'm in the store tuning in, like what would be very grounding for me, what would feel very protective for me. And I think about the foods that I teach and I start looking for the things that like, how am I feeling right now? Okay, I need to feel more joy because right now I'm feeling fear. And I start eating according to that. Other people in the store are grabbing all the inner aisles, the aisles that are processed that have 100, ingredients that you don't know what it is. They don't care. They just want it. It'll last 25 years if they don't use it for this hurricane or not. And they're grabbing all the things that are complete comfort foods. And I know inevitably they are like, oh, and now I got to go back. They tell me all the time, I ate all this stuff during our hurricane night. And if you could just learn, you're just wait. And I know it's emotion and fear and all that, but there's ways to get around that when you start consciously looking at food as your friend and learning to adjust accordingly, your body getting your attention, telling you what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. I like to say I was weaned on Twinkies, and that's not far from the truth. Our pantry was the envy of every kid's house on the block because we had so much junk in there. Ho-hos, ding-dongs, cookies, Twinkies,
Wow.
stuff like that. Pop. I didn't drink soda. I didn't like the taste of it, but all that stuff. And other homes had that because that was in the 60s and 70s when that stuff was just coming on and we didn't know how bad it was for us at that point. And then the breakfast cereals, Captain Crunch and all that stuff.
All of them.
Count Dracula and Cocoa Puffs, Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs and stuff like that. It's
You were the
crazy.
envy of all, I bet.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
In my house, I had a neighbor and there were 4 girls and they had that. And I had a mom who would say to me, and she'd look at the ingredients and she'd say, more than 3, leave it be. If there's more than 3 on the label, it's not going on our table. I mean, I was mortified when friends came over. That's the mom I had.
Yeah.
Turns out she was right.
She was right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You call yourself a food therapist. What is a food therapist?
I actually call myself an intuitive food therapist.
Okay. What's an intuitive food therapist?
I think there was a big difference, and only because, I did study nutrition and dietetics. I'm a registered dietitian. Do I sit all day and make meal plans for people? Absolutely not. That's not my interest or my where I'm skilled in. Where I'm skilled in is being able to guide people to be intuitive for themselves. So being a therapist is teaching them to be their own intuitive food therapist. Being able to, some of the things we've already discussed, is being able to identify the intuitive cravings and the reasons behind it to create balance and longevity in the body. When you open up your refrigerator, what do you see? What do you what do your eyes lock on? And same thing when you go to the grocery store, the farmer's market, wherever you do your shopping, or if it's online, what are you locking in on? And I help you as an intuitive food therapist understand a little bit why. If maybe there's some past wound. We don't even know, but depending on how people believe in generational uh, DNA or past lives, wherever you fall in any of those sectors, but sometimes our cravings aren't even ours. They were passed down to us because our great grandmother had to do that because they were suffering and they only can eat potatoes. And suddenly we have a scarcity around potatoes. I mean, there's actually generational wounds that can be discovered through food and addictions and non addictions. I know somebody who, another example, had digestive issues. They ate fast all the time. Fast. I mean, they were done before anyone can even like halfway get through their plate. And in looking at it, we went back to the fact that her mother's mother was married to an alcoholic, and dinners were the worst time to sit around. So they ate quickly through the meal. And so there may be something energetically in the DNA that was passed down. It's like, eat quickly. Doesn't matter if you're going to have a digestive issue by doing it, but just eat and be done. And when, I help people kind of look at the spiritual and emotional, mental areas in their lives and maybe go back and see, is this even yours that you're having these issues? So there is some medical intuitive piece to intuitive food therapy, but it's mostly helping identify where you're at and how food can be a resource for longevity and wellness.
That's a really interesting point, Sevanté, because I've always thought of generational food stuff as it's just what our family eats, especially at the holidays and other birthdays and things like that. I never thought about it being generational, but you're really tapped into something on that.
Oh,
I got goosebumps when you were talking about that, which is truth bumps or, spirit bumps on that. Say more about how do we explore that and see if that's really us, and I'm sure you do that with your clients. If you can give us the cliff notes on perhaps the process that you take your clients through to figure that out, between, is this really my craving or is this my great grandmother's craving who only had potatoes to eat because
mhm.
she was in Ireland during the famine?
Yes. Well, my process is very uh, multimodal. I use a lot of multimodalities, and I'm a highly intuitive person, so I can literally sit down and pull the cards. But I teach people to do that. I have a certification program. I teach people to do what I do for themselves and for their families. But we pull cards and we ask the right questions. And I'm trained also to help go into someone's subconscious, see what might be hiding in there, creating a little bit of stagnation and blocks. And then I help, do some esoteric clearings and look at things because it's very clear to me when someone walks in, I already know there's something going on, emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual. And I also know whether it's theirs or it's 5 generations back or it's just something that's not even theirs anymore. So there's a lot of, I have a lot of tools in my toolbox, but I try to convey a lot of those tools in the teachings that are in my books. High Vibrational Wellness, that one, the latest book has several different authors, not only me, but I handpick these authors so they can share their tools too. But in my sessions, I have a variety of things depending on what we need. And I also look depending on how many people are familiar with chakra systems and elements, I help them create a pathway so they can understand better. And even it's simple as thinking about the fact that we are nature. Most people don't consider that um, something that even matters. I beg to differ. For instance, some people think, I'm going to be out in nature. I'm going to go skiing. I'm going to go to the lake. I'm going to go to the beach, etc. Well, I say, well, we are nature. And so in terms of my teaching, this is the first thing I say. And that, We are earth, air, fire, water, and spirit. So let's just take that. We are the 5 elements in nature are earth, air, fire, water, and spirit. So let's just take earth. Let's just go in order. Earth is our bones. We just represent that our body is represented by the earth, by our bones. And then air is our breath. Earth, air, fire. Now, fire is the chi. Fire is the energy in our body. There's not a system in the body that doesn't require fire. You can't have your reproductive system, your endocrine system, your cardiovascular, it doesn't matter. Every system requires energy to burn calories. Everything needs fire, okay? Earth, air, fire, water. Water is the water in our body. Water is the blood, the liquid that's moving through our vessel. And then earth, air, fire, water, and then lastly, spirit. Spirit is our soul. So we have a soul inside of us, or spirit. And so if you look at the fact that we are these 5 elements, we would want to take this vessel, this body you've been blessed to have, and feed it according to nature. And so in my sessions, I help look at, is someone doing that, or are they doing things counterintuitive? And that's why the body sometimes has food go in, maybe some of like the foods that you talked about earlier growing up. Although good and tasty, are those nature? How are those supporting earth, air, fire, water, and spirit? And the truth is that they're not. They were made in a lab, and they're made with lots of things that aren't of nature. And so I want to teach people how to go back to the very basics of eating according to those elements. Even the easiest thing is like, you're enraged, you're mad, you got past it for the promotion, somebody cut you off, your throat rage, whatever triggered you, and somebody comes home or you're having that, like what would be the easiest thing? I'd be looking at ways to cool that down. I'd be looking at watery food, things to kind of bring the anger down, bring that energy down, and raise the energy a little bit up. And I look for things that will calm that. Watery food, watercress, watermelon, things like cucumbers, things that have a lot of water in them, immediately tones things down. So these are I look at everything. I have a lot of great discussion when people come to see me, and then I can help identify a path and a plan.
How much does that plan involve? You gotta get this many macros. You gotta eat this many grams of protein. You gotta do this. You gotta do that, because there are so many different food plans out there that it makes a head spin, mine
Yeah.
included. And how does that come into play in your
For me,
food
it
plans?
doesn't. If anything, if somebody's considering, I don't provide food plans. That's not what I do per se. As a nutritionist, I'm more of an intuitive guide, a spiritual teacher around food as medicine. But what I do is someone's like, I'm really thinking of going vegan, and I'm not really sure. We look at the energy around this particular person's body. Is it in alignment for this person to be completely vegan and plant-based? And we kind of look at the energetics of it versus saying that would be a good plan, or paleo, or breatharian, or fruitarian. I mean, you're right. There's a billion of them. And that's where I think people get so confused. And the more that I can help people become completely in tune with themselves, to allow them to check inside, is this in alignment for them? I teach in my new book, I do a little affirmation before someone even goes into the grocery store, and I say, and I call it soul shopping, by the way. It's really because, do you need this? What do I need for my body now? And I give a little prayer to tune you, because let's just say it's salmon. And should I have salmon tonight? Is that in alignment? Where yesterday salmon didn't do a thing for the body, but today it really would be great. Why? Salmon's an amazing anti-inflammatory. And today you had a really caustic conversation with someone and your body's feeling more inflamed, like salmon would be great. And so I help people get very present with their food choices. So I don't diagnose, I just look at what's happening in somebody's world and then help them look at how they can do it for themselves. My classes, the deck is a great starter. And then we look at sort of a full program in that regard.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
You've referenced your mom a couple of times with
Uh-oh.
that what is it? 3 or we don't
More,
eat it. What is
yeah.
it?
She just passed. So like you mentioned that, like it's only been 2 weeks. So I'm like trying to like
Oh,
keep it very like without breaking out on a show. She said more than 3, leave it be.
yeah.
But she lived to 87, so she did pretty well.
God love it. And what was the other one?
Oh, her little rhyme. If
Yeah.
there's more 3 on the on the label, it's not going on our table. I almost feel like I'm 4 or 5 years old again and watching my friend from across the street look at me like, "Can we go play at my house tonight? I got mac and cheese over there with some
I got
jelly."
jelly beans.
Like, I just was like I remember, like, just going like this, sinking down. But, and I just before she passed, I'm like, Mom, I dedicate all my books to you because you were right. And then when I grew up and had 2 daughters of my own, they know exactly, and one's a chef and one is, one's following, the second one's following in the older one's footsteps. And I was like, wow, it just really stuck generationally. And we're all intuitive and we're all very much centered around consciousness of food. So she passed knowing that she did create a little bit of a legacy because she said, keep this going. I'm like, it's in all my books. I talk about it on almost every interview. Yeah.
You've also referenced the fact that you're very intuitive. Were you intuitive as a child? Did you learn to do that? Tell us a little bit about where that comes from, and is your family like that? What's the story behind that?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. You bring up that side. I wasn't sure we were going there, but yes, I came from a very intuitive family. I would say that I'm a 4th generation intuitive. My great grandmother was the town psychic in Russia back in the day. Everyone would go to her for the healings and the guidance. And my grandmother was intuitive, but didn't really utilize it so much. My mother was an animal healer. She could just touch animals and either keep them here or allow them to cross that rainbow bridge. She was amazing with animals. Just like she was Miss Doolittle. And then I grew up in very much always addicted to I had to have a tarot and oracle cards, like even as a kid. While the other kids were playing the crazy eights and go fish, I always had a tarot oracle card. So I was always anybody want a reading my whole life. But what was interesting, and I guess it was a turning point, is that I was with my mom and she was getting a psychic reading. She's a big hippie back in the day in the 70s. And the reader looked down and said to her while I was playing at her feet, she said, your daughter died of food poisoning in a past life. And it wouldn't be surprising if she ended up doing something in food in this life. And like I heard that later in life and I just thought, whoa. And then later on, a powerful intuitive I saw, she goes, oh, Sevanté, it wasn't just one life, it was many. You died over and over of food poisoning. And what's so strange is I remember as a child and then a teen, I was like a hypochondriac and a germaphobe around food. There was no explanation for it, but I was always checking that expiration date. I was always smelling it. I was always making sure there was no mold. I was so hypersensitive around food and food preservation. How long has that been sitting out? Are those eggs, it was like, they're fine, but I wasn't going there. So when I ended up going to college and getting a degree in food science, it was a no-brainer actually, because it was like, because I needed to know the science of how everything worked. And so between that fearful upbringing and then my science background, and then later I ended up getting a job in the, I guess, 90s with Hollywood's top vegetarian chef. I learned a lot more back again about consciousness of food and how they operated around preserving foods for Hollywood elite, and watched how that kind of went unfolded. And literally just 30 years of this, 30 plus years, really kind of honed in my overall understanding of food on all levels. So yeah, the spirituality takes more forefront than the science. That's why I don't do the registered dietitian sit in, what is your food plan? I'm more looking at the higher understanding of what's going on around what's on the dinner plate. And it works. It's
Isn't it
unique, but it works.
isn't it fascinating to see how we're led on this trajectory throughout our lives that we can't anticipate,
Ever.
certainly, but when you put the pieces of the puzzle together, that it really falls perfectly in alignment with where we are at any given moment.
It's astounding. And I always say the play has been written and we're just walking through the parts. And I never really, yes, I always knew that, but now sensing all the interviews I do and the decks going around the world, I have to just believe that because I was doing something completely different. Honestly, I was producing, my husband's a music producer. We have a thriving studio here, and I had a little boutique of record label for meditations. I was recording meditations, and they were very successful. I just noticed a colleague. I loved some of her meditations, and we got to talking about one of our other passions. And at that time, this was in 2019. I was taking an advanced food healing course. I hadn't taken one in a while, and I wanted to see what was new compared to the year prior. And then I had finished this course, very difficult course. And I finished it on 11/11. And I said, let me get through this course, but maybe there's something we can do around food. We're both passionate around this. And I finished it, aced it. It was great, learned a lot, got me more excited about food science again. And then I thought that and said, how about an oracle deck? Because that was something I always knew I would create one. I just never knew what, when, how. I knew the why. And then it just kind of unfolded. So I just laid out a bunch of food, closed my eyes, and just kind of went into prayer and meditation and say, show me if this is something. And then it just poured in. And that was that. And then 2.5 years later, that was 60 foods, which I think was a lot.
That is a lot.
And then for 2 years, people kept saying, we want more foods. We want to cook. We want to make meals. Chefs were reaching out to me, even restaurants, like they would say, we want to create an intentional meal with what you put in your decks. And I just thought, oh my God. So, or have you considered this food? I thought 60 foods, that was it. Anyways, 60 more foods came out in the next deck. So now there's 2 volumes, and then created another 4 little bonus. And so now there's 124 foods. And I've been slowly writing a 3rd one because people kept saying they want more food. It's just amazing. There's a lot of food in the world. That's true. But now people really want to know what this means in the world. And I get the stories all the time. What's going on with radishes? I've been craving them. It's just crazy, the stories I hear.
I don't know
Yeah.
that I could name 160 foods. Seriously,
Yeah.
it's like during the Olympics, when they're doing the March of the Countries and they say we have 135 countries. I'm thinking, I can't even name 135 countries. And some of them have a population of 75, but they're still their own country, and it's the same kind of thing.
You'd be surprised. There's a lot. Yes, there's the basics, right? There's the broccoli and the cauliflower and the cinnamon, strawberries and blueberries. There's that. But I did make a point of introducing exotic foods because I felt if I'm going to put something out there, I might as well create the education around it because in the US, we're used to sort of the vanilla, like this is spinach and this is cherries. But I wanted people to learn, like, what are they doing in the Isles of Trinidad? And what are they doing in Jamaica? Because they don't have the same stores and pharmacies. Their field is their pharmacy, it's their garden. And let's learn how they're doing it in South America. And how are they doing in Costa Rica? So I did write a book later. It's on Amazon called Top Exotic Foods for Natural Healing. And I picked 10 of those most important foods that are from this first set of cards and talked about what they are, why they're great, and why you should eat them, the 10 best unique ones like durian, soursop, ones people haven't heard of, but now they're becoming popular. And then at the back of each chapter, I put little excerpts from NIH and National Institute of Health studies that show I'm not just saying these are my top 10. I'm showing you that this one's for diabetes and they're studying it. There's 10 studies. This one's for cancer. This one's for heart disease. And so I put these 10 little foods. So I made a point of sharing where I can about foods that may sound like they're foreign, but they're becoming common here and how to get them. I don't want to just tell you, hey, this is so great at fight cancer. Then you're like, great, well, where do I get it? I provided that too. But I think that that was important. And now I hear that teachers are using the decks for their kids to teach geography. Like, where's this food from? Oh, it's from Costa Rica. Where's Costa Rica? So I never know what's going to happen. But when the Girl Scouts started ordering the decks and asking for classes, then I thought, wow, it's not just spiritual like this little woo-woo world anymore. It's a little more mainstream it's becoming.
Yeah, interesting. Huh, fascinating. Which begs the question of the food that's made in Trinidad versus the food that's made in Sicily versus the food that's made in New Orleans, and elsewhere around the world. Is there a frequency to that food that serves the people of that culture that perhaps wouldn't serve, like somebody's eating shrimp and grits in New Orleans, and is that gonna have the same benefit to somebody that's living in Haiti? And I'm sure that it's individualized. I get that. But is there a correlation between not only here's what we can grow here, so here are our customary foods, and this food is grown here because it provides energy for the people living in this climate, in this social situation, in this whatever. Is there more to the equation than meets the eye with all of that from a cultural perspective?
I love you, Julie. You asked the best question ever. I think that's a really good question. I know, and you always hear eat local. There's a reason for
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. Right.
The enzymes in the soil, the nutrients in the soil, they are more adapted to each area. And there's something the more local, the better. It also means the less processed, the from when it was picked to when it's consumed. And so it is great to have foreign food from all over the world, 100%. But it's also great if maybe some of those foods can start making their way into local farms and even your own garden. I mean, it allows you to say, I really love what you're doing over there. I wonder if I could grow that here. I am a huge believer in eating local and less is best, right? My mom taught me that, and we know the less processed, the more bioavailable it is for the body. And this may be a completely like um, off the wall concept, but I'm just it has relevance to what you're saying. And I tried it, so I don't share stuff unless I've tried it. So years ago, my hippie group of friends said, have you read about the Anastasia books? And I'm like, what is the Anastasia books? So the Anastasia, for those who know about this, is a nature spirit. At least this is what I'm sharing that I read in these books. And the advice was that you should take seeds and spit on them. The idea is that when we're creating food in our own garden, it's going to assimilate our DNA in the family if you can put your own saliva in them. And this is what I'm reading, that's what the nature spirit said. So years ago, I was creating my own garden. My husband thought I had 3 heads, but he did it anyways. So I took the seed, called out my daughter, called out my husband, like, all right, everybody spit into the bowl. And they're like, oh, you've just taken this too far. I'm like, no, I'm reading. They said that these plants are going to grow and they're going to be exactly nutritionally what the 4 of us need. It was our bet. We did it on like 10 different things. I'm telling you, instead of like 4 watermelons, you had like 40 that year. But I don't know what happened, but we had the most flourished garden that year that I did this idea. I'm like, talk about eating local. And we're telling these seeds with intention and
Wow.
frequency and vibration to eat according to what is in what we just meshed in it. Whether it was true or not, all I know is I did it and I thought these books were brilliant and I tried it and I can see from a kind of many different levels why it would work. That's food for thought. It's free advice whether you use it or not.
Oh, I love it. I thought you were gonna say it was like some old you had mentioned that your heritage is Russian. I thought it was maybe some old Russian custom or something to spit on
Maybe
the
it
seeds
is.
or Greeks or
They
maybe
said it hey, they said it was a Russian nature spirit that provided this wisdom in these books. I have to go find these books somewhere. But so many people, there was this trend that everywhere I go, somebody was reading this. I said, I gotta get in on it. I didn't have time to read. I read like a little bit, but as soon as I heard that, I was like, I'm gonna try that. I really am resonating with that concept. What can go wrong? Nothing. So if
if
this
you
food
think of it, send me the link to that book if you can find it, and
I
I'll share
will.
it with everybody. Yeah,
I
that's
will.
fascinating.
I
Well,
will.
when you started talking about Anastasia, I thought you were talking about the Russian princess Anastasia, who supposedly that story, certainly, when the Tsar was murdered and all of his family, supposedly the daughter Anastasia survived, and the Tsar's mother was in Paris during the revolution, and so Anastasia all these young girls came and said that they were Anastasia, and the grandmother would meet with them, and she'd say, "Well, no, you're not." She was waiting for them to say something, and the Broadway musical of that is wonderful. I remember my mother talking about that because that was big probably in the '50s when that was all going on, and the Tsar was the cousin to the King of England, and the story was he asked for help and the king didn't send help, and so that's a whole whole 'nother rabbit hole, but the whole story about Anastasia and to me, how does that mirror that story which you just told us about spitting on the seeds? That whole story about the Russian princess and trying to prove that she was part of that Romanov line, the DNA of that line, and then you're talking about the Anastasia spirit guide that's telling you to spit on your seeds because of the DNA going into your seeds that are gonna help them proliferate. That's a really interesting connection there.
Real interesting. Now I'm intrigued. Well, I'll look it up. I'll get back to you if I can find it.
Okay.
But it seems like it's come up in conversation every now and then. And it all goes back to, just to close that link of what you asked about eating from far away and eating locally. Yeah, eating locally is great. It's just as we become a smaller world with the ability to buy things online, we can get things from other places. And I think the benefit outweighs the opportunity not to do it or, missed opportunity when you realize that some of these things from other places are medicinally natural and creating wonderful, wonderful health benefits and tips. And that's why they're being studied here. Moringa is another one. Well, while moringa is really, they call it the miracle tree, and you see it in Africa, and like, really saving lives in countries and populations. Moringa is now grown right here in the States. And so is sauerkraut and some of these other ones that I'm referring to. So what I used to think was so far away, they're now, here in Florida, what used to be only in the tropics that you can get, I can grow it on the island I live on. So that's what I talk about in some of my books is like, it's not as far away as you think. And the benefits definitely outweigh anything else. Go for it.
Is there a benefit to eating seasonally as well
Yeah.
instead of bringing the whatever plant in from another country in the middle of the winter to eat the things that are available in the area eat locally, eat seasonally as well. Is there a benefit to that? Have you found that in your research?
I find that that's 100%. I'm a huge Ayurvedic person. I import Ayurvedic teas from Nepal. I love Ayurvedic principles, particularly because they also follow the nature's 5 elements for the body and the doshas. But what I also love is that we're supposed to eat local and we're supposed to eat what's now. And so I'm a big fan, as I've said, about eating present. What is present now? So I believe that freshness, bioavailability goes along with those theories of what is fresh now. What can we get at the farmer's market now? Not, yes, it's good to put stuff away for a rainy day and put in your freezer, but if you can get foods that are fresh and available now, that's the best for the body. So yeah, eating seasonal, eating what is in alignment with the energies of our bodies and our biorhythm, which follow seasons. So yes.
So let me throw kind of an off the wall question at you about that. I have one of my best friends lives in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, and it's freezing there, all
Yeah.
winter. I mean, they have like crazy cold temperatures. And in that part of the world, and my first job out of school, I lived in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I mean, that was just like quite the education for the winter. I grew up in Ohio. South Dakota winters made Ohio look like the tropics. And people would can foods when they were fresh, like peaches and cherries and things like that, so that they could eat them in the winter. Does that count as, eating locally, obviously? Because let's say they buy it at the farmer's market, but they're eating cherries that have been canned in glass jars in January instead of in July when they're harvested. How does that work? And is that something that's gonna be better than eating cherries maybe imported from Guatemala or someplace like that?
I think you already know the answer as you're even asking me that. But I can't say I'm an expert in this, in answering that. What I could just say intuitively, if you say that, I think it's great that you can have them because you're still getting the nutrients. And so I think that outweighs having to determine whether it's in season or not. That especially the benefits, the vitamins may be really good. I just think intuitively, if you're in winter and suddenly you're like, I really want to have those cherries, I almost think that your body's asking for those cherries. And so there's reason for it, and that is great. I think that's better than getting cherries that have been canned, processed, uh, whatever they do to pass, sterilize them, can them, ship them, and all those efforts to travel. That's still several hands in processing versus you doing it from the local. There's no
Outweighs
comparison.
it. I agree. I
Yes,
got the same answer too from Spirit on
good.
that. You talk about eating alive food and minimize eating dead food. Say a little bit about that.
So I I love everyone to eat whatever they want. I'm not a hardcore advocate of anything because I've had every diet. So there are times where I've been vegetarian for a very long time, but there's been times I've been vegan for years, and there's been times where I eat meat and everything else. I've been off that for some time. And so what I can say, and it's not a knock, it's just the truth, is that foods that have been killed and slaughtered without without care and consideration have a different vibration when you're eating food that's been killed out of fear. Yes, can you pray over the food? Absolutely. And I hope you do. And to say thank you for giving your life up. Thank you for allowing me to provide food for my children. Or, something that just shows reverence always changes the vibration. But I feel that food is more alive when it comes from a plant, a fruit, a vegetable, an herb, not spicy. That's my books. Whether you eat any type of meal, and I had every type of diet, you still need fruits, vegetables, herbs, nuts, and spices. The body's requiring it. Nature, Mother Earth will tell you that. Any diet will tell you that. There's not a diet that's going to say no. I mean, there's some diets out there that say don't eat fruit, which I hate always hearing that because you can't have the sugar and they, help you lose weight. But my God, all the antioxidants and all the phytochemicals are just loaded in fruit. So I always hate hearing that. Maybe reduce them if you need to. So I don't know. I think there's an energy around food. I can't even scroll through social media because when people start putting stuff up about slaughterhouses, like I can't go there. So if you're gonna go back and now ask me a question, well, let's get into hunting versus food in the slaughterhouse. I was like, I just don't wanna, you can go to so many levels of this. And people ask me all the time, are you like an advocate or an activist? I'm like, no, not at all. I mean, I'm asking you to intuitively choose. Like I said, I used salmon as a reference before. Is this protein? Do I need protein from an animal today? Your body might say yes. You actually need to ground and have the protein because that's more of an earth energy that you need right now. And there can be other times where tofu and tempeh and, mixed vegetables completing proteins and nuts are okay. So did that answer that?
Yeah, it did. Terrific. And
Woo!
I hadn't even thought about going with the hunting thing. That hadn't even come up in my brain, but you've obviously been asked that question
Oh, I
before.
have. Yeah,
Yeah.
I have.
What's the first step to changing one's diet and wellness that you could recommend? Is there something simple, easy, easy to implement that we all can do that will start us on our trajectory to help us be more intuitive about our food choices?
Well, there's lots of sayings, but the most important thing besides food is medicine is trust your gut. And there's a reason for that because we've talked at length today, and I'm just so glad that we care how important it is to just check in with our own body. We already know. We already know when we're doing something. We already know it's bad. We're not that asleep. We know when we're eating something unless we're completely unconscious. And that happens a lot when you're just eating and watching TV. You don't even realize you're not tasting. You're not even realizing the amount of portions you're doing. Trust your gut. I also think pulling back when you're eating, when you eat in reverence, which means you're not eating and you're on the phone and scrolling, you're not doing the TV, like you're eating meal as a sacred opportunity to nourish this temple. I think there's something to that. And they're just simple little things you can do. And
Like
asking,
what? Like what are a couple of simple little things we can do?
well, those are the little things of pulling back from electronics, sitting quiet, yeah, at mealtime, slowing down how we eat. And I know a lot of people have conversations where they go to dinner and, it's a very cultural thing to do. But I always say that, like, take time to, like, look at your food, look at the textures, look at the things that are that you prepared, how they were prepared. I give thanks to the vibrancy of the color and just learn to love food in a way that you would like it to feel inside the body. And so a food journal was also what comes to mind. It can maybe just take notice of what you're eating. You don't have to do it like I'm not saying go and count calories. This isn't a program where I'm saying that. What I'm saying is just take note of what you're consuming. You would be shocked. You might find that every Tuesday you have a standalone meeting with so and so, and then you end up eating a certain food. It would it would be amazing for you to realize that, oh my God, every time I speak to this person, I feel this. And every time I go and eat that. And so when you start becoming conscious of the foods you're eating, what's happening in your surroundings, and you write it down, you can start to pick up on patterns. You can start making small choices. to make little choices about being more aware to eating the foods from the outer aisles or locally, farmers market. Lots of small changes lead to the big changes. But even the simple is just like, what is in alignment in my body tonight? What would be the best meal to prepare for my family? You'll be given the guidance. I would love for you to consider learning my system or at least checking them out. Many people have. It's just amazing to me how often it happens where Mother Nature has given us the guidance of why foods look like the organs. I mean, you know about how foods like blueberries and carrots look like the eyes and walnuts look like the brain and they're excellent for brain health. And
Almonds look like the ovaries.
yeah, exactly. Well, red bell peppers look like the heart, the chambers of the heart. And I remember, and I wrote about it in one of my books, a woman came up to me at one of these festivals and she said, I just want you to know I have heart disease. That's how she introduces herself to me. So I said, would you like to pull a card? Would you like to see if there's a message for you? And 124 foods. By golly, she pulled the red bell pepper card. It was amazing, but I see it all the time. It's like, then I went into explain. So yeah, just start to really trust your gut.
Okay.
It's there for you to learn and
I
listen.
agree. I agree. What last question. Why do you think we incarnate?
To learn more about ourselves, to fulfill missions that have yet to be completed, to teach others, to perpetuate the awakening process. Lots of reasons. I think this is a good time to awaken more people as much as you can and to create more wisdom that's coming in on the planet, not just the unique teachings. Like, I think this is a unique teaching. And then there's the younger generations all have something to offer that didn't offer before. Like, we all came in with this specific dharma. I know I've been told it has been mine and well contracted well before I got here. So just walking through it too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I thank you for the work that you're doing. I find it fascinating. I'm not aware of anybody doing it quite like you are. Certainly, we all have our own nuances that we add to the recipe of what it is that we're exploring in our lifetimes. But I'm really drawn to how you've combined the science with the spirituality of food, because to your point, when we first started this conversation, food is really sacred in a lot of ways, as are our bodies. And we wanna think of it that way, which is a new way to perhaps approach food in this climate of 50 million diets and 50 million suggestions, and who do you know what to follow and what not to follow, and just because this works for you, it doesn't mean it's gonna work for the rest of your family members. So, what a legacy you're creating, not only for individuals, but for families, because if we can teach our children about this, like your mom taught you, my goodness, you have really started a snowball rolling of something that to me seems very profound. So, thank you
Wow.
for the work
Thank
that
you.
you're doing. And you
Thank
do
you.
such a great job and so eloquently in distilling this into understandable verbiage where anybody can utilize what you're talking about in their daily lives
Yeah.
instantly. Yeah.
Yes.
So
It's really is practical spiritual nutrition. If I
I
had a
agree.
breakdown. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. So, how can people learn more about you and your work? Get your Oracle deck, get your books, all of that.
Sure. I have a website. It's the Center. It's long, so I'm going to give you two ways to get there. But Center for Intuitive Food Therapy.com. And I've abbreviated that into initials, CIFT. So fifthofficial.com will get you there as well. Some of my books are on Amazon, so you can get them there. But if you want to find one with a real intuitive message, you can go on my website and I have everything there. And I have a ton of classes. I have food in relation to the tarot card, food in relation to your zodiac signs, food in relation to actually the archangels and ascended masters. They have protocols too on how we can eat and what
Oh,
colors and when
well,
and what.
we're gonna need to have you back to discuss that one.
Okay, that's one of my favorite
I
classes to
bet.
teach, and I have a future book. I'm working with someone who's very much into archangels. She's out of Wales, and we're writing a book called Angelic Resonance. And I've been channeling food and codes and, oh my God, sacred geometry and quantum physics. It's a whole it goes out there, but it's all based on what the angels want us to know about food in this lifetime.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
All righty. Well, thanks so much for joining us and teaching
Thank
us
you.
all this wonderful information. We've given you a lot to ponder, everybody, and things that you can integrate into your food plans at your own homes here instantly. So, in the meantime, sending you lots of love from Sweet Home Alabama, mwah, and from Florida too, where Sevanté is. We'll see you next time. To enhance your spiritual journey, click on one of the videos below and remember to subscribe, leave a comment, and share with your family and friends.